Hey, what is up, everybody? This conversation is with Bharat Krymo, who is one of my favorite people in the space because he is an avid collector. He's been around for so long, and I think he has an incredibly patient and informed take on where we are, not only as a market, not only as a collector and investor, but also as a technologist. So we talk AI, we talk NFTs, we talk gaming, we talk protocols, we talk about leaders and founders in the space. And I think it's very informative for forming your opinion and how you're approaching the ecosystem overall. As always, thank you to our sponsors for making this possible. Thank you to our viewers for tuning in to every one of these that we do. Again, as always, it means the world. So sit back and enjoy. And here is Bharat Krymo. Awesome. All right. I am joined now with Bharat Krymo, who is not only the GP at 6529 Capital, not only a WolvesDAO member, but also one of the best and most, I would say, the one of the largest NFT collectors in this space, one of the largest angel investors in this space, one of the most highlighted advisors in this space. You have quite the resume, is basically what I'm trying to say. There's so many things that we can jump into today, but first off, just happy to have you here. And hope you're doing well, brother.
Hey, Hunter, thanks a ton for having me on. Really appreciate the kind words. I'm not sure I deserve much of that praise, but hey, I'm a ultra degen, right? I'll put it that way. I've been in the space long enough where I've crossed into different areas within crypto. So, it is, an area and a space that I deeply love. So I'm glad
Amazing.
to be here. Appreciate you having me on and looking forward to a good discussion here.
Of course. I think the easiest place to just jump into things is Abstract just went live. You have some ties to Abstract. Let's just jump into like what your initial thoughts are, how you're viewing the new L2 and the teams that you're working with.
Yeah, hey, great question, right? So I think one of the issues I've seen in crypto over the last many, years is a lack of good distribution and a lack of effective go to market, right? So one of the things that jumped off the page for me was, just watching the way Luca handled not only the acquisition of the Pudgy Penguins franchise, but the way he saw through and grew it during a period of a very significant bear market, right, for
Mhm.
crypto. And he not only took care of it, but he actually grew it over that period of time. And to me, that says a lot about a founder, especially a founder who's come from Web 2, who's had success in Web 2, and then come into Web 3 and applied those principles. And I think a lot of the challenges that I see with crypto native builders these days is the moment that they have friction or they have a problem, they shut down, right?
Yep.
That is the point at which you've got to really embrace the brand and you've got to get out there and speak with the community and kind of drive stuff forward. And I believe that's what he's going to bring to the chain, right? So I have zero investment in Abstract, to be clear, right? But I have advised a couple of projects that are launching shortly on Abstract. So Ryui Studios is one of them. I'm actually one of the principal investors in that. And they were in their journey of looking at and exploring, where they should actually launch, and they were thinking about Solana for a while. And as we were ideating through this process, I recommended Abstract to them because I saw what Luca was building. I saw what his team was engendering, right, in terms of just a philosophy and ethos, and it was very much about how do we make our ecosystem successful? And that to me just kind of rung all the bells for me, right? I come from big tech, where I was a senior executive for many years, and I've seen companies absolutely botch this aspect of handling go to market, handling the onboarding, handling ecosystem. And I saw that he had that culture permeate his entire team, and that to me just jumped off the page. And then I recommended that company go all in, Ryui go all in, and it has been an amazing experience for them. And then there are a couple of other companies that I invested in. I invested with Beanie in On-Chain Heroes as well, right? So that's another one. But Scarly had already made the decision on Abstract, which is terrific, right? So it's just another sort of case where, he saw what was already an excellent chain and, great support and made that decision. So, I'm glad to have two sort of significant portcos be part of the ecosystem right now.
Yeah, they truly are two of the leaders, at least from my perspective of things. I think gaming, IP, lore, storytelling, going to be massive. And obviously, that's where you've aligned with those two companies. Um, I'm also curious and I think this is a good point that you made, which is when there's friction, when there are setbacks, can you look to a leader who's going to be able to push through? Um, you know, as an investor and somebody who's looking at dozens and dozens of teams, is that one of the primary things that you're looking for when you're looking at founders?
Yeah, 100%. If the founder embraces challenges and change, then I know they're going to be successful, right? Like
Mm.
I've seen a persona where there are people within crypto that, as the heat gets turned up, they just shrink away, right? I mean, they avoid all public, contact. And it's the complete opposite, right? I mean, if you're in crypto or you're outside of crypto or anywhere, you got to jump on the grenade, right? You got to shield the community and you've got to absorb the blast. And I see people do the opposite. They run away, they hide, right? They disappear for months on end. And to me, that's a really, really bad leading indicator of what's going to be a disaster down the road, right? So there are a few questions that I ask founders as I, determine whether or not I'm going to invest in them. And it's really, how do you embrace change? And, also trying to assess if they have a growth mindset or not, right? Because some people are very fixed. And if you're fixed in terms of your approach and things kind of change, the markets kind of change on you, how do you adapt to that, right? So those are other elements of like, it's a perfect intersection of what I call IQ and EQ. The ability to not only have that intelligence, but also the emotional response to be able to handle that change, right? When things get difficult is a big leading indicator for future success.
Especially when it's not even in your control as well. I think that those are possibly some of the most emotional times, where you've worked so hard and then all of a sudden it doesn't go quite the way you want because something like DeepSeek,
Mm-hmm.
something like Trump token launches and pulls liquidity out. How are you, navigating a completely dynamic landscape? And how are you also reacting? How is the team looking to you for that guidance? Are you going to be a leader, or are you going to be somebody who is, behind your back? They're like, oh my god, he's freaking out again. I think that's obviously an area that you should be looking at when you're investing.
Yeah, for sure,
um,
man.
on that topic, even DeepSeek is, and I know you're well versed on the AI side of things. You stay up to date on all things technology. DeepSeek, something that was launched out of China, basically rattling the cages of everybody in the AI world, the energy sector, um, the GPU sector. What is your take as somebody who's experienced and knowledge?
Man, I love it, man. Like disruption, no matter where it comes from, is a good thing, right? I feel like, and I posted about this today. I think the West has gotten really fat and sloppy in terms of just that kind of scarcity mindset on innovation. We've thought we've been sort of really strong for years and decades, and we have all this great innovation. But there are countries that are doing things better, cheaper, faster than we are. And unless we get a kick in the pants every once in a while, it doesn't get the fighting spirit going, right? So to me, anybody who open sources projects anywhere in the world is an all-star, right? Because what they're doing is they're effectively, they're creating code and they're committing it to the public, right?
Yep.
And there's a great saying, right? If you want to go fast, you go alone. But if you want to go farther, you go with community, right? And open source is the heart of going further, right? And so when I see things like DeepSeek happening and disruption happening at a pace and scale and cost factor that is orders of magnitude better than what we're doing, it tells us that we are doing something wrong or we're looking at first principles incorrectly, right? So I think it's very good disruption. I think it's absolutely vital. And as we think about areas like AI, which are going to fundamentally change and disrupt what we do for the next, 30, 40, 50 years, I think it's very important to get all of that like fat removed from the system and get very effective at delivering great open source technology. And I think it's also a wake up moment, right? The problem with open AI, I mean, is in the fact that they've focused on a very closed source model. They've been partnering with big tech, and they haven't opened up their APIs, right? So I think this is a wake up moment for them. It's a wake up moment for everybody that you've got to open source this technology, because just being proprietary is only going to get you so far, right? And I think that's a huge sort of wake up call, quite frankly.
Do you think it's fair to say that we are currently in a nuclear arms race in AI? This is the modern day Oppenheimer.
It's possible, but I like to think of this as being a more positive outcome for humanity. I think you can look at it from an arms race perspective and say, hey, it's the US versus China, right? Or the US versus everybody else. But that's kind of very a parochial view in a way, because if you're truly open source, it's everybody,
Hmm.
right? Everybody benefits from open source. Now you could argue, right? I mean, there's a lot of people who are, kind of, with the pointy hats. They're basically saying that, DeepSeek has got a massive number of GPUs, and they're kind of, it's a lot more expensive than they're making it out to be, right? Which is entirely possible, right? And it could be that they have found a decent model, and it's not a incredible model, but the fact that they open sourced it, they put the gauntlet down on OpenAI to say, it's your turn to make a move now, right? So OpenAI could effectively say, screw you, I don't believe you, right? Mine is still better. And they could take that approach, but innovation kind of it gets at you and you never see it coming, right? So to me, I think it's a really interesting masterstroke, because it forces everybody to change the outlook and approach. So I don't think of it as an arms race,
Mhm.
Hunter, as much as I do, it's the world getting more collaborative at one universal outcome. And hey, some people are going to use this stuff in a really bad way. Some people are going to use this for the betterment of humanity. But I like to take the positive outlook on where AI goes, right? And I like to think of it as something that benefits everybody, regardless of where you may be in the world.
100%. I think that same take could be said for so many other technologies, blockchain included. Um, we'll hopefully, and I think also on my end, take the positive end of things. I think that's also just a much more fun way to look at it as well.
Agree.
um, in the world of AI, which has obviously impacted the globe at geopolitical and nation state levels, it's also affected us as participants of the Web3 space in a very real way. We've seen the rudimentary introduction of AI agents on the timeline, but we have also now seen some projects that are pushing to obviously open up the boundaries that we call Web3 and how not only we interact with it, but also how we view it. What is your take on AI agents and the frameworks and the participants in this space right now, and how are you approaching it?
It's interesting. I think it's very much it's like it's a very early meta of kind of where things will evolve to. I think a lot of it right now is mostly junk, to be honest. And the reason I say that, right, is there is no such thing as a truly autonomous agent, right? An agent who has agency and control over what they do, right? And everything is kind of like the puppet being controlled by the puppet master at the moment. So unless you get to a point where you have, TEEs, trusted execution environments, and secure enclaves, and you have the full agency, turned over to that autonomous agent, and that agent's acting on everything from financial decisions all the way through, what they tweet on the timeline to how they buy or sell, right, assets. Until that is completely autonomous, you're just looking at, you know, effectively agents that are co-opted by humans, right? So partnered AI, if you will. Now, I think we'll get there eventually. Of course, whenever we get the full benefits of AGI, right? And it could be months away, and as we've seen over the last 48 hours, it could be days away, right? It could be hours away. There could be developments that we are not even aware of that could change the game on this. But I like it as an experiment for now, right? And I think it gives people a concept and an idea that they can hang their kind of mental models around. And from that perspective, I think it's really positive, right? Because it gets them thinking about, like the art of the potential of agents down the road. And I think that in and of itself is a powerful thing because, a lot of folks in crypto prior to the last 6 to 8 months, they had no concept of AI, right?
Zero.
They had zero concept of AI. I mean, they knew it was important, they knew it was coming, but other than, interfacing with Chat GPT and, doing a query or two, they probably have not thought about the implications of, this very important aspect of, you know, modern day technology and future technology.
I I think one area that probably a lot of people have questions on are, you say a lot of stuff is junk. Are there areas or projects that you look to and say, well, actually, this is less junk, or this they're actually working on something in an area that's worth paying attention to? The frameworks obviously is one area that I think has put the technology in
Mhm.
people's hands a little bit easier. But I'm just curious if there's anything on your radar.
I think they're all experimental. I think the interesting thing is the frameworks in time could get interesting, right? So, by frameworks, I mean, AI 16Z, it could be virtuals, right?
Yeah.
It could be Cerebro. I think all of these are interesting, but like, so you don't know where a true autonomous agent's going to get launched, right? And I think that's the interesting aspect. There are a few TEE companies that are really, pushing the boundaries right now. Fala Networks is one of them. Marlin is another one, and there are a handful of those companies that are actually pushing TEE and have actually been developing TEEs for a while, even before the agentic sort of meta that we've had, right? So that is cool tech because that is, ensuring trusted compute where no one but the operator has, control of the keys. And that's hugely powerful, right? Because that basically says, look, if I turn this over to an agent and that agent is operating on their own behest, nobody has access to those private keys to control that agent, right? So I think there's some interesting spaces with those intersection of technologies, but I think largely the frameworks are, they're kind of building tech, and it's more hype at this point because there's no real sort of there's no product at the end of it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
all just it's
Yeah.
frameworks. It's like scaffolding is the way I look at it, right? You've got like the roof, you've got like some sheetrock, but you don't have what is the foundation of a real house yet, right?
Yeah.
And I think that will emerge in time, and it's hard to say who's going to be successful, but I do like the commitment to open source because I think what that says is you've got people developing, and they're developing to a common spec that is upstream open source, which means that in the future these elements should connect together, right? And I think that's positive because then you have the idea of reusability of code, reusability of frameworks, and so on and so forth, which just accelerates the rate and pace of future technological change.
I think I was a little closed-minded years ago, and this has obviously changed and with recent events that open source to me was weakness.
Hmm.
You were giving up moat, you were giving up market share, you were giving up your ability to execute in a highly capitalistic and competitive landscape. But I've shifted on this after watching the power of open source for not only onboarding developers and onboarding partners, but um, I think it's a strength if you use it correctly and you're approaching the market with the understanding that all tides rising rise raise all boats. I, I do see it now. I get it. I get it.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing, Hunter, is that open source in and of itself is kind of interesting, right? But when you start to somehow incentivize the development of open source via a token, now you've done something very interesting, right? Because now you're incentivizing and you're paying people to in a community to participate in this development. I mean, I don't know if you're following VVV, right, which is Venice,
Yes.
and it's crazy because that's just a deep seek model on chain, and it is now almost approaching a $2 billion market cap, right?
Yep.
It's nuts. It's nuts to me because anybody can go out, fork, DeepSeek is already open source. So you can go create another on-chain version and launch it. And, people are aping into this thing at $2 billion, a $2 billion valuation. it just shows you that there's a thirst for, all things, open source and disruptive, even though there may not be a moat,
Yep.
right? And
Yeah.
that it's just crazy to me. That is just absolutely loony to
It's
me.
absolutely insane. $2.1 billion in 2 hours.
That is just nuts, dude. So that's a unicorn, right? A unicorn that launched a short while ago. And I know Eric Voorhees has been talking about Venice for a while, right? This is not something new. But look, I mean, what is the value that this delivers, right? Other than the fact that they've put a DeepSeek model on chain, right? And they're
Yeah.
saying agents can use it. Yeah, but 10 other people can do the same thing. BitTensor has done something very similar and has two subnets that have DeepSeek running, right? So it's all at some point it's just crazy, right? Because I think fundamentally people have to think about the implications of the actions they take. And I think the token alignment with open source is very interesting, very cool. Because if you look at like traditional tech, if you think about Red Hat, which was one of the largest open source projects ever, right? They were bought by IBM for a pretty significant valuation. And you could argue that was all open source. Why did they do that? Well, it was because of the support that Red Hat had built around the open source models, right? So they put their own kind of flavor around it. So I see these open source models. I see the incentivization of these open source models. So I think people are going to be able to wrap around things like support, wrap around better scaffolding, better frameworks, better, cheaper, faster ways of, getting, job X done, and then kind of put the rocket fuel in it with a token, right?
Yep.
I think that's the beauty of where this AI and crypto intersection happens. But of course, you're going to have a lot of these like grifts that happen, unfortunately, which are going to extract a significant amount of, what I call goodwill and really good capital out of the market, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I think that's the growing pains of the market. It's also, uh, you know, we'll likely get to a point where our user base, whether that is through their own will or through, the constant smacking of their dollars evaporating, they'll become educated, and that is good for the space, I think. Or maybe they won't become educated and they'll just keep burning money. Um, One area on AI, because I want to shift over into NFTs and venture capital a little bit here, but I think the merge here is artificial intelligence on the agentic side has been rumored to be, what does it look like when it starts trading and collecting? But we've also seen artificial intelligence be used for the creation, especially on the NFT side. And it's been a theme, I would say, even with the early days of algorithmic um, and generative art, starting all the way back to autoglyphs. How do you see AI playing its role in the art world?
Oh, I love the confluence there, right? I'm a huge Botto fan. I'm also a huge Deep Black fan as well, right? So Deep Black, I think, was the earliest, one of the earlier ones rather, and then you have Botto that does such an amazing job of community curation, right? In addition to the engine itself, the community curation and having like this human kind of collaborating, not humans, but a set of humans, right, in the community collaborating with AI to make a decision on which output or which model will kind of be born next, if you will. I think is a very fascinating aspect, right? So I'm a huge fan of it, and I think the work that Robbie Bharat and others did on the nudes, right, is pretty compelling early days work that is pretty impressive, right? It stands the test of time. Some of the graylist artworks that exist today are the nudes from Robbie, right? So from
Yep.
Videodrome. So I think it's great. I love to see that. I think it also is a clear dividing line, right? So you have the artists that have been creating one of one art painstakingly by hand, which will continue to be a very skilled and sought after set of expertise, especially as you start to see more and more stuff offloaded to AI and the AI models get better and better. Skilled labor is what I call it, but like anything that you use your hands for and you use your own mind for, becomes that much scarcer and rarer,
Hmm.
right? So I think it's benefits us, it benefits our abilities as humans, but at the same time, it also is quite innovative and transformational from an art perspective, and just how the old masters can be absorbed, and then you have these new creations coming out that are a fusion of multiple old masters, right? I think it's pretty interesting to see where AI goes and where the tech and art sort of evolution happens.
Armin van or Pindar van,
Tinder,
yeah,
yeah.
Pindar, sorry. Oh my god, he's going to kill me. He came out and said that he expected AI agents to collect AI generated art over human art. Do you agree with this thesis?
I think so. I think you're gonna find that over time the relationship between AI and humans. I mean, I don't think it gets strained, but I think right now they are being kind of told what they should do, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's a part of their development itself, of the AI brain itself, right? It's the you know kind of that pathway towards autonomy and being an autonomous individual or being, right? And I think over time, as they get further down that pathway, they're going to start thinking a little bit like us humans as well, right? I mean, we think and we have cults and culture and all that stuff, right? I think you're going to have AIs develop cults and culture themselves. And that's going to be like, hey, my friend Bob, the AI, built this amazing artwork. I want to collect Bob's work, right? I know Hunter's a human being. I love his work, but hey, I've got to collect Bob's work, right? So I think cults will form, cultures will form, identity will be created. And I think it is absolutely normal for that to happen, right? So I think you will see some of that, emerge. I think that's a spectrum. I think it'll happen over time, and I also think that they will perceive value better than we can, right? So they may see art, and they may have an algorithm, and they may say that this art from this human is actually worth much more than people are sort of giving it a value today. And I can forecast 5 years from now that artwork's going to be X dollars, right?
Hmm.
So it's going to have the ability to act algorithmically on things that we perhaps cannot even see on the surface, right? So I think that all changes the way and approach that autonomous beings will kind of bring forward value, if you will.
It, I I'm excited for that future. Very excited. In the present, though, we still rely on humans mostly. I would say on the NFT collecting side of the world. And again, I consider you one of the leaders, if not uh, one of the top five, top 10 collectors in the space. Um, I'm curious what you are seeing in the NFT world from a what is being overlooked, what the next trend might be, what's getting you really excited, who your new favorite artists are. I'm so curious to get your commentary on this.
Man, it's the art market is so cyclical, right? It's operating. I mean, granted, we've
Is it
only been
over?
no, 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 not at all, right? So I'll a little bit of history on me. I started collecting NFTs in 2018, right? So I was very early to this meta, and then 2019, I really got serious about it. And you could argue that we went through one bull slash bear cycle, right? So we haven't had the benefit of multiple bears and bulls from an NFT perspective and a digital art perspective. So we're kind of going and entering into our second bull, if you will, right? And I think this is my own kind of perception that we are starting to see the first, green shoots of what will be an NFT bull run that starts. Right, you're already seeing some of the OG projects on the PFP side starting to get a little bit of life. You will eventually see all of that stuff trickle into one of one digital art. Usually, one of one
Mm,
digital art is kind of the tail end, right? Because it costs the most, it requires a great deal of time and effort to actually evaluate and to assess when making a buying decision. I still think there are great pieces out there, right? I still think all the great artists are still out there. A lot of tourists have left, right? A ton of tourists have left. But all of the great artists are still out here, and many of them have actually stopped building for the moment, right? Because they realize that the market is a little bit stagnant, or they've built but they haven't minted, right?
mm.
So they have things, they've created, but they haven't necessarily put it on the chain yet, and they haven't minted it. So I think that we're maybe months away. Actually, 18 months ago, I said that Q1 2025 is going to be when the NFT bull market resumes. And I still stick to that hypothesis even now. And I think somewhere between, March and April, as all of the crypto FOMO money starts to, look for an outlet, and as people start to think about like what they do next, I think you're going to start to see some of that, enter the digital art market back in force, right? You'll start seeing people collect, either grails, or they'll collect from, artists who've stuck around and are still doing great work, right? That are on the timeline. So I'm bullish on everybody who's stuck around, Hunter. I can't really name names, but all of the great
Sure.
folks are still here building, and I think people will continue to collect from them, right? As they roll out great art, people will collect great art from them, and I think
Exactly.
it's just a matter of time for that
I
market to come back.
I agree with you on this full-heartedly. One that you might be able to talk about, it's not an artist, it's a collection, and obviously you're very prominent about it, are CryptoPunks. They have a very special place in the history of NFTs. And I think they have a very special place within the financial side of things, with us seeing, their floor prices, how they're considered, quote unquote, blue chips, whether you agree that that's a term that we should be throwing around or not. But also even on the loan side of things, where we're seeing all of a sudden art have a completely financial side and extractable value side. Do you see that becoming part of that I think fuel for this next bull run?
I think it will be. I think, in fact, it was a fuel for some of the bull run that we've seen in fungible tokens as well, right? Because a lot of famous collectors who had liquidity tied up, right? Many folks put all of their liquidity into digital art, right?
Mm,
And the only way they were able to tap into and get liquidity for the last 18 months, if you will, was to effectively borrow against those assets and take loans out, and then ape into meme coins and other utility tokens, and multiply their money, right? So it's kind of like this is circular loop, if you will, right? So it absolutely makes sense that being able to borrow and be able to sort of buy fungible tokens and grow that bag, and then go back and put that into more non-fungibles, it's going to be a vicious and virtuous cycle, if you will, that continues. And I think that's only going to be more prevalent as more and more people collect artifacts like punks, right? Because I think punks are probably one of the lindiest, most real, you know, pieces of digital art that exists on the planet, just because of the nature of their relevance. Anybody can see a punk and say, yeah, that's a punk, right?
yep.
And they have such a great liquidity for a non-fungible token, right? Because you can borrow or you can sell a punk with a lot of liquidity, right? Very readily available. And I think that is a huge sort of catalyst for people buying and looking at punks as a great store of value, right? Because I posted the other day and I said, digital art and NFTs that have graility, quote unquote, provenance, and immutability, right, have power laws that are much more valuable in time than Bitcoin, right? An equal amount of Bitcoin. Basically, to mean that some of these rare assets in a long enough time frame, if you say a punk is worth, I don't know, let's say it's, I don't know, 2 Bitcoin, right? Today, in 10 years, that punk is probably going to be, some multiple of the Bitcoin value, is what I'm trying to say, right? Which is
Right.
kind of
Leverage. Yep.
really interesting and powerful, right? Because that means that these ultra grail assets that are very few in number are going to have an inordinate impact on, future financialization, right? And future value, right? So
Yep.
I think it's a absolute vital part of a virtuous loop.
The future, I think just the future of all these different concepts and industries that we have becoming more digitalized, more on chain, is a really powerful way to approach it. Um, and I think again, punks is just a great area to identify and align with. The art industry, the identification industry of how are you representing yourself, like with brand personally. So I'm excited for that. I'd love to shift over to other areas though. Uh that might be changing quite significantly. One being SocialFi, another being online reputation, Ethos Protocol being one. I know we had Tribe recently go off. And the other side of SocialFi also being Kato, which has basically incentivized social action. I know I've just thrown out a whole bunch of different things that are random, but if there's one of those that you'd love to hop into first, I think they're all relevant to what the future looks like.
Man, you're talking my bags here, so I'm pretty happy. So let me
This
first
is
of
not
all,
a paid. This is not a paid show.
it's true, it's true. Hunter and I didn't even discuss these topics, guys, just to be transparent, right? But it's funny because so I'm an advisor to Ethos, and I'm an early investor in Ethos Network as well, right? It's kind of ironic. So Trev and I met during the Frentech days, right? So we actually met, and a small group of us became very close and very tight in the Frentech bubble. Even though Frentech went and rugged us all, we we developed some really good friendships. And I stayed very tight with him. And the reason why Ethos came to be and why Trev sort of came up with this brainchild was the fact that there was this lack of ethics when you looked at how people operated within Frentech, right? So they would buy their keys and say, "Hey, we're going to do a 3 with you," right? So the old ohm model of I hold, you hold, we hold together, and number go up, right? But the funny thing is, they would say that, and like a week later, they'd dump your key, right? So he was like, "Hey, there's a massive disconnect between people who have ethical sort of an ethical backbone and integrity in the space versus people who just say it for the sake of saying it, right?"
Right.
And his master stroke, and I know you've had him on, so I'm saying a lot of the same stuff, but it was brilliant because he was like, what if we had a trust pilot score for individuals in crypto, right? Because there's so many people who scam. There's so many people who have, this persona of being a good person, but they've actually rugged multiple projects along the way. And he's like, it's like a perfect sweet spot. And I was like, dude, say no more. Whenever you launch this thing, I'm investing, right? And, I was very happy when he also asked me to join him and be an advisor because, first of all, we come from traditional tech. We come from very large corporations out in the Web2 side of things, big tech companies, and we see things very much alike in terms of the problems in Web3. So it was an immediate sort of symbiosis. And so I'm very, very bullish on Ethos and what they're going to build, right? And by the way, they're about to launch something that's going to be even more more interesting. And kind of on that dimension, I have to shill what 6529 is doing with Seize.io. So Seize.io is doing a very similar thing, right? In other words, there are people who have been collecting meme cards, from the 6529 mothership for years, right?
Yep.
On a weekly basis, if you will, from all these great artists. And people are accruing what's called TDH. And that is all another form of social capital, right? In other words, it is a form of, a way for you to sort of measure social capital of each individual. So I think these are all really cool networks that are forming that are around, individuals in the space and kind of what they've done on chain and historically that will be a gauge and a barometer of what they might do in the future,
Can
right?
you
So
can you
it's
talk more on specifically what you guys are doing there? I think that would be helpful for those who aren't aware.
it's an incredible sort of platform to build and to put together like-minded individuals who are not only interested in the arts
Mhm.
but also interested in the power of network states, right? So as you think about like the power of like decentralization and the freedom to transact, these are all individuals who are like very much bought into that ethos and mantra, right? And the idea behind TDH and the power that it provides you is effectively your ability to have social influence on trustworthiness, et cetera, right? So it's
Mm.
another sort of way, just like ethos is capitalizing on looking at on-chain information, creating a reputation score that you're going to see more and more of that emerge. And there's a lot behind the scenes that I can't even talk about. We should have 6529 jump on here at some point if he's willing to do it. But I think that would be a great discussion in the future.
If he's around even now, he can use the same link and hop in. But yeah, no, I'd love to have him on and chat, or both of you back on. Um,
But yeah, those two, and the third one, Kaito, that you mentioned, I want to briefly speak to it. I think Kaito is onto something, right? And
Massively.
it is massively onto something, because the fact that you and I are here talking, right? It's because we know each other. We've kind of been in the crypto space for a while. We have a certain influence, right, within the space. But you think about the individuals and projects that launch on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, right, in crypto. Many of them go kind of under the radar. Nobody hears about them. Nobody knows about them. There are terrific, people who are writing excellent thought pieces on crypto that nobody even knows about, right? They have 100 followers, 200 followers, and yet they go completely under the radar. And I think what Kaito has done is effectively bring an algorithm that brings those voices and brings those projects to the forefront, right? I called it, intelligence. I'm trying to remember the word I used. Maybe attention networks or something, right? Incentivized attention networks is the term I
You did.
used.
The word you used was
Yeah,
incentivized.
attention networks,
Social.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and the concept behind that is like, look, the most powerful thing that we have in crypto is our attention spans, right? Like you think about any project starting from Bitcoin back in the day, right? To any project that launches today, they're all memes, right? To a great extent, they're memes. They may have some utility, right? I don't want to say Bitcoin doesn't have utility. It certainly has a store of value utility, right? Which is powerful. It's completely transformed, traditional finance, if you will. It's disrupted traditional finance. But everything's a meme. So if you take that approach and you say that like people hop attention from one shining, object on the hill to the next shining object on the hill, if you're able to capitalize on that transformation of people's perception of what they view as important, and you're able to monetize that, via Yaps or via the Genesis NFTs, that is hugely powerful from a network effects perspective, right? That means like the next 20 launches that you've never heard of, you have the ability to go influence whether or not those projects get launched, right? Or whether those projects have visibility. Because marketing and agency in crypto is a joke. Okay, I'm just going to throw that out, right? In other words, like the concept of marketing is really a meme in crypto, right? So if you can capitalize on attention instead of having to hire an agency to do X, Y, and Z, you've done a great job, right? You found a really effective way of executing on an outcome that previously would not have had a value capture mechanism. So I think that's why I love what Kaito is doing, and I think it's going to be one of those big lasting projects that come out of the cycle that people are going to be like, how the heck did I miss that, right?
Yep.
I really do.
I think we'll see more people realize that there are ways to quantify and I guess again, incentivize, quantify on the social side, but also the reputation side.
Mhm.
I think also on the past action side, such as what have you collected and how long have you held it. We're going to see a huge spur in that activity, leading to all types of different reputation scores and point scores um, that are relevant in all their different ways.
Yeah, completely
Very,
agree,
very
man.
interesting stuff.
It's
Um,
super interesting.
one area also that I think is relevant here is I guess how you're approaching we'll talk more on like the individual side, but also how we look at these different chains and how they're kind of I guess like rewarding users. The topic of how people from again a chain or protocol level are promoting and giving I think like the attention to the people that are building on like their app layers has been an area of I think question on many people's minds. um I think Ethereum Foundation and Base have been two that have been probably the biggest head scratchers. Abstract being the complete opposite of that, where they are basically saying, hey, we are trying to identify and go through and find the real builders, and then we're going to put a spotlight on them. How do you see that kind of future for how what like I guess again protocols, founders, and these large networks being custodians and stewards to what they're doing?
It's a great question. And I think, unfortunately, many chains, the foundation, and many others have treated decentralization like, you know, it's kind of like, because it's decentralized, you get no support. And I'm telling you, it's the
Mm,
complete opposite, right? Decentralization is really cool, but you have to be able to do the things that are necessary to onboard people into your ecosystem, right? And I saw what Jesse just did with that silly,
oh,
video that he
don't
did. It
get
was
me
pathetic.
started.
It's like pathetic, right? He wants people to go. It's like, that's what I call clueless onboarding, right? Versus people like Luca and people like Saigar and others in the abstract ecosystem. And I keep mentioning them because even though I have zero incentive in what they do, I see that they're doing good. I see that
Yes.
they're actually doing something different. I see that with Toli. I see that with Raj in Solana, by the way. They are also the same, right? They basically embrace ecosystem participants and they encourage them to come over because they support them building and they support them by announcing. They support them by changing their PFPs to the PFPs of new projects that launched, which is how you embrace and bring people into the fold, right? You don't bring them in the fold by not responding to them, right? You don't bring them into the fold by saying stupid things and acting like you're smarter than everybody else. That is the problem with Ethereum Foundation. That is the problem with Base. They're tone deaf, right? That's the problem with Coinbase, not launching virtuals, right? It's the dumbest thing. Why wouldn't you launch virtuals, which was A asset in your chain on Coinbase? Why would you launch Peanut instead? I mean,
Yep.
it's like tone deaf, right? And I think these guys don't get it. They absolutely do not get it. And they need a really, really stiff and stern wake up call. They need a mass migration out of, all projects supported by them, right? And that's the best thing that can happen to them. Right now, they're the Titanic, and the iceberg's headed straight on, and they have no way of veering course at the moment.
I think they even know it though. I think they see the iceberg and they're almost like, well, we're gonna hit it. Oh well. Like I just don't
Yeah.
see. It just doesn't feel like they're equipped, or I don't know what it is. It was one of the biggest head scratchers watching that video, and then watching not only double down but triple down on the position.
Yeah.
It just it blows my mind.
It is crazy,
Blows
man.
my
I mean,
mind.
like, Vitalik needs a wartime business development leader, right? He needs a person, right, who is just 100% flamethrower, and all that person does is just kicks the foundation out of the way, kicks all of the politics out of the way, and just starts onboarding the biggest, networks and protocols and thought leaders into the space, and says, "F you all, I'm going to make this happen. I have the mandate to carry out and execute like this," and just be a vocal voice that just scorches earth, right, to get that done. And that's the only way it's going to happen. You need to have that individual just be a total maniacal 100% evangelist of community and ecosystem build out, and say F everything else from a politics and bureaucracy and process perspective, but this is the approach we're taking for the next 365 days, right? So everybody, bring your needy, bring your homeless, bring your unwanted. We're going to take them all, and we're going to scorch the earth with it.
Love it. Love it. Oh my god, you have me inspired. I'm ready to go. I'm ready for war here. Um damn. I love that. Yeah, no, you're spot on. It's I think decentralization has been used as a get out of jail card for business development. Um, and for so long, we've really just seen people say like, "Oh, well, the community will take care of it, or somebody will figure it out." But there is power in having a centralized person who is part of a decentralized network say, hey, I'm grabbing this by the horns and we're going this direction, and rallies the troops, gets people aligned, gets the community aligned. And I think even a great point there is about the community, which I think the community is the lifeblood of these protocols and these projects and these teams, and you need to make sure that you're focusing on them and keeping them happy, and aligning their incentives with yours.
Yeah, 100%, man. It's not that complicated, right? I mean, it's it's scary how quickly and simply they can make a change here and really turn the tide here. And but they got to act on it. They got to, it can't be tweets. It can't be simple, like pithy comments. It can't be, well, how can I help, right? I see Jesse with his, how can I help? Or I'm helping, right? And it's like, it's bullshit. It's all bullshit, right?
Yeah.
It's all superficial crap. And it's lackluster leadership. And it's absolutely no hair on fire, no sense of urgency is the challenge right now. It's malaise.
Yeah. We do have, obviously these are a lot of like existing areas that, if they're live, they're addressing, they have to address what, is actively in front of them. There are some things coming up though that, leaders and these protocols can take your words here that you're saying and actually prepare and align alongside them, and that being on the L1 side. So you asked a question on X a couple days ago, maybe 10 days ago, asking, which L1 are you most excited for? And we have the main four that are coming, which are Story, Monad, Bera, and Hyperliquid. I'm going to turn this back on you and ask, which one are you most excited for, and why?
Let me start by saying that the one I pick is probably going to be my bags, right? So keep that in mind.
Completely fair.
So
I think the disclaimer should be in the space whenever somebody says something. It's always
yeah,
they're talking
it's
their
it's
bags,
always going to
right?
be bags, right? So look, I'll tell you that I have, I've been in the Hyperliquid ecosystem for a long time, right? And they are doing a bang up job, right? An absolutely bang up job. And Jeff is, kind of creating like a Harvard Business Review study around how, founders need to think about, disruption and transformation. He's pulled the what I would call the financial perps equivalent of what DeepSeek just did, right? With launching Hyperliquid, which I think is super interesting, and I think the long tail of value that they deliver with the Hyper EVM and the Layer One when they launch is going to be just as transformational, right? I think it's going to be fantastic. So I'm very bullish on them. I'm also very bullish on. I think the other three we talked about were Monad, Berachain, and Story, if I'm not mistaken,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
So I'm also bullish on the other three as well. By the way, I'll kind of go in order. Story, I've also invested in their round, and I think it's very interesting to think about like royalty and IP, especially as we enter this age of provenance being important and where the source tech came from and where
Mhm.
an artifact, if you will, was built, right? How did that digital artifact come to be? I think having that provenance is going to be a very important element. And I think what Story is doing around stitching that workflow and the fabric together of not only do you have an IP asset, but the royalties that link to that IP asset and ensuring that you can automate the process by which people can borrow and use and ensure that the creators actually get the incentive flow back and not have to do it in the old traditional way that people do it today through contracts and paperwork and all of this rigmarole that you have to go through and jump through hoops. I think is going to be very powerful as we move to this future state of AI incentivized digital art, etc. I think so. I think Story is also going to do really well. I think Monad and the problem they're trying to solve is pretty big as well. And I think parallel EVM tech is already out there with Say and others, but I think what Monad's going to bring is going to be pretty disruptive. I think the challenge, if I'm being honest, with Monad and Berachain, is they now have a new exemplar to compare against, right? And that exemplar is a completely community launched layer one and perps protocol that's best in class.
Yep.
So previous to Hyperliquid launching, they had a certain gravitas to them, right?
Yes.
But post the launch of Hyperliquid, I think Monad and Berachain have this reckoning to do around, hey, we were very heavily VC invested, right? So we have all of these folks that have put large checks into what we're about to deliver. By the way, Story Protocol is the same way too. Don't get me wrong. I
Right.
want to make sure I'm completely fair on this. Story Protocol is the same way as well. They all have the same challenge because now they see this new mantra and model of community activated, launches, and they're going to have to somehow reckon this, tension of being very heavily VC invested to now having to launch a token and have community be a part of that token, right? So, how much of that value is going to be available to day one, TGE participants versus how much of that value is going to be stored in-house with, a lot of unlocks that happen over time, right?
Yep.
I think those are the elements that they're going to have to really think long and hard about, even if their tech is really good, right? I know Barachain has fantastic marketing. I don't know about the tech. I can't speak to it. I know Monad has, pretty decent tech, um, and they have decent marketing as well. But I think these are all the sort of elements that they're going to have to
They're
cope
gonna
with.
have to
And
come with a fully, fleshed out
yeah,
product and marketing and tech and everything because of Hyperliquid.
you got it. They're going to have a working product day one, right? It
Yep.
can't be a cut and paste of X, Y, and Z protocol. It has to be a fully self, standing app or set of apps that are best in class,
Yep.
right? And they've got to think about how they, incentivize community as well, because otherwise people are going to sniff that stuff out pretty quickly.
100%. 100%. Um, yeah, I think that's a fair way to approach it, and I think, obviously you've talked your bag a little bit there, but I think it also is it's nothing but truth. And I think many would agree with what Hyperliquid has done from a setting a standard, because that is, I mean, personally, and I know many people in my community, in 555, they consider that the standard for what the future of perps, and obviously there's a lot of excitement about what's coming with the L1 going live, and we've seen the auctions, we've seen people like even Pixel Vault pivot to moving there, and it's gonna be exciting. I who knows what else they have up their sleeve. It's definitely not gonna be super straightforward, but it's super super exciting.
Yeah, completely agree, man. Completely agree.
Yeah. Um, Bharat, I don't want to take up too much of your time here. I know we had an hour set aside. I'm not sure if there's any other areas that you want to go into. Obviously, we did stay a little bit away from, I think, some of the gaming stuff on WolvesDAO, but I'm genuinely curious if there's any other areas within the entire ecosystem, investing or collecting, that you're excited about and top of mind, and you think people need to have on their radar.
Yeah, I think gaming is a really good one, to be honest, Hunter, right? I think that the challenge is that there have been some missteps by gaming companies over the last, I would say 12 months or so.
Hmm.
Some have rugged the community, and I'm not going to name names because it is what it is. But there are some that have done really, really a really tremendous job, right? And I think one of the best, and that I'm like, you know, that I sort of participate with on a daily, weekly basis is Infinity Gods. And the reason I like what they've done is they have, you know, a they have captured the mind share of crypto native gamers, but they also have launched you know, a product in the web store that anybody can get access to, right? And they are hiding all of the complex elements of the crypto aspects of gaming and taking that inertia out, while under the covers all of that accrues to their token, right? So I think that's a beautiful way of launching elegant mobile gaming that then links back into this ecosystem and flywheel effect of token staking, et cetera, in the crypto side of the world, right? And I think they've sort of managed to do that really effectively. I think there are many games doing that. I think Pirate Nation's another one, a good example, that is building completely on-chain tech. And what I like about Pirate Nation is they've built a completely cross-chain stack, if you will, right? You can think of it as an infrastructure or platform stack. Um, and it's the proof of play world engine. And by the way, if you go look at the stats, they're constantly number one and number two in terms of MGAS, right? So think of that as like transactions per second and throughput on the chain. So these guys are like blowing it out. In other words, they have a very scalable, set of technology that they've launched, and that people can take advantage of and build into. So I think there are a few like this that are really, really exciting, and they're actually disrupting the way that other people can build in the space. So I'm very excited about those kind of catalyst effects, if you will, where you can take and reuse, this really great on-chain framework, and you can launch a game of your own on top of it.
Yep.
And that's why I like extensible technology being built, right? And there are others like Citadel and many others, like our good friend G Funk and what he's doing with with Battle Plan, and Wolf Game and all that stuff. But there are many of these, and Pixelmon, right? A
Yep.
ton of really, really great builders that are building. And I think one of the things that people forget in crypto, unfortunately, is that unlike a DeFi app that you can build with a couple thousand lines of code, maybe 20,000 lines of code, right? And many of those primitives have already been built. Gaming requires a lot more horsepower, right? It takes a lot more time. It takes a lot more effort. It takes a lot more live ops and delivery. And I think people have to have a little bit longer time horizon when they look at games versus looking at DeFi or some other utility token, right? Like another protocol of some type. And I think if they have that vision and perspective and take a little bit more of a low time preference, I think
Mhm.
they're going to be very successful. So people like Treeverse have been building for years, and they have a great product that's coming out, right? Like Loops and Team.
Yep.
So I think
I'm
it's
an
a matter
investor.
of, yeah, there you go. So it's a matter of, it's like,
Finally.
yeah, I know. It's like
I
you
can
see
talk
the
my bag
teasers.
finally.
There you go. You can see the teasers. It's amazing stuff, right?
Yep.
But like it takes a while, right? It's not easy stuff. It's hard. So I think that's the perspective. So I'm excited for where I'm really truly excited for where gaming is. I think it's extremely undervalued right now, and I think it's probably going to be one of those explosive moments where you start to see the masses on board. It's going to be through a really wicked game that just turns the spigot on. Maybe it's off the grid or somebody, right? But it just like everybody comes in mass, right?
Yep.
And it's going to be awesome.
I can't wait because we have such a fun future ahead of us when that happens. And I think a quote that wraps this up even more perfectly from yourself is, "It's a movement, not a moment."
Oh yeah, baby. It
Perfect.
is, man.
Bharat, I can't thank you enough for your time and coming on and sharing your knowledge and your perspective on everything. It was incredibly helpful. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you do next and what you get involved with next. And hopefully we can watch what 6529 Cap does as well.
Yeah, hey Hunter, really appreciate you having me on. It was a blast. I really enjoyed it. And hey, anytime you want me on in the future, just give me a holler.
Of
Happy to be
course.
back on.
Of course, friend. Well, thank you to everybody for tuned in today and paid attention. I hope this was helpful to you. We'll catch you on the next one. Thank you.